Hello everyone and welcome to my quick look of Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. This is just going to be a mini review discussing what I liked and didn't like about the game. A little something off the cuff because I really want to talk about it, as it's really left a heavy impression on me and easily is in my top 10 games of 2019. Now, if you guys don't know, Bloodstained Ritual of the Night is indeed a Kickstarter game, and I really did enjoy the amount of effort that was put into this campaign, and thankfully with the coming to Xbox Live Game Pass, I actually had the opportunity to play through it basically to its completion, almost 100%. I think I got around 60% or something of that nature. I did explore like 90% of the map, so I feel like I did a good job of, covering the bases. I will go back and complete the game, but as of now, basically did everything to finish out the main quest, which took me around 13 hours. So without further ado, does this game hold up? Is it really, worthy of the praise? Well, let's find out. First, I'll start with the story. You basically play as this girl named Miriam who wakes up from a slumber of many years. She's a shardbringer and used to get experimented on by some terrible men along with her friend Jabal. These shards are basically demonic powers that your character can acquire that'll fortunately go evil and possibly freeze up because your body can't really handle the amount of shards going in, which is kind of a key mechanic of the game. When you start picking up shards from killing other demons, you can use it to attack other people, and Jabal, being the kind of ultimate demonic lord that springs upon this castle in Transylvania. Oh, I'm sorry, this isn't a Castlevania game. It's some part of England. It's up to you to go into that castle and put a stop to everything. You have this cool scientist dude that helps you out, and you run into some pretty colorful characters throughout your quest, and it makes for a really interesting time, and kind of reminds me a little bit of the way the Dark Souls franchise kind of handles the NPCs and banter and stuff like that. The dialogue of this game is actually not that bad. I feel like it was written pretty well. It's kind of hokey at points in a jokey way. It's very melodramatic as a callback to the PS1, PS2 games of old, but the story has a surprising amount of heart, and even some themes that were pretty deep. It took me for a surprise. On top of that, the voice acting, albeit a little bit cheesy at times, is actually pretty good, surprisingly, and I really very much enjoyed the voice cast, and I felt like they all did a really good job conveying the melodramatic but still serious tone of the storytelling. Overall, I thought the story was pretty solid, everything considered. I did enjoy the amount of plot twists they have, albeit a bit predictable, and it was a really fun 13-hour ride, and I definitely didn't regret a single bit of it. I actually do want to go back to keep reading more and figure out more of the lore behind Miriam and the Shardbringers and kind of what this evil laboratory organization was doing. There's a lot of stuff to uncover, and I really liked how the castle does a good job of letting you kind of piece together the puzzle yourself by going through various bookcases and just exploring. Aside from the story, how is the gameplay? I really love the gameplay. You have a variety of weapons and demonic powers to acquire to really make your character stand out. Each demon has their own slew of interesting powers, from firing true arrows, to arrows that home in on opponents, to a sword that spins and spirals like a weird drill. There's all sorts of cool, unique things to pick up, and it's really dope. You also eventually later throughout the game get these things called familiars, which can help you out from deflecting attacks to buffing your character to just being on the offensive. And all of these are really good, and you can level them up as typical Metroidvania affair. There's a lot of upgrades and different materials you can get to craft new items and acquire different weapons, and it's really standout stuff. Speaking of different weapons, that's something the game definitely doesn't lack. There is a slew of weapons here that you can use. We're talking samurai swords, short swords, long swords, great swords, whips, guns, all sorts of different unique items that you can use to dispatch a variety of demons. And speaking of these demonic enemies, they're pretty tough. You got these giant great sword armor guys that can rip through you in a heartbeat, really cute cuddly dogs and cats that summon hellfire, which is definitely terrifying. And of course, you have your generic skeletons and melted piles of bones and flesh that kind of throw bones and stuff of that nature at you. Each of them have their own attack patterns that you're really going to have to recognize and use all the mechanics in your inventory to fully take them down. From jumping to jump stomping, which is where you jump and do a dive attack, which is really cool and lets you get a little bit of leverage to reach platforms at times. And of course, you have backstepping, which is a Castlevania or Metroidvania classic where you can attack, backstep to dodge from an opponent, and maybe do another attack to get a little bit of extra damage in if you're lucky. The game does a really good job of avoiding you from playing smart and tactically, but don't think you can get off scot-free. There ain't no checkpoints in this game unless you specifically save at a save point, so you gotta make sure every encounter is patient. You don't want to go in there wild swinging. You gotta make sure you understand what you're up against, because if you lose, it's game over and back to that save point, and sometimes you can lose a lot of progress. I know personally there's times where I thought, I don't need to save here, I can go on to the next room, only to get thrashed by a big enemy and lose a lot of progress. It's all on me, so I'm not mad at the game at all, but dang, I wish it's made some smarter decisions playing throughout. I really enjoyed the amount of punishing gameplay here and how it never felt overbearing. The difficulty curve wasn't too bad, it's very gradual and really rewards the amount of experience you get, and the enemies feel like they're really getting tougher as you progress through the castle rather than just starting you out on hard mode. And that's something I really much enjoyed about the combat here. The enemies are pretty varied and each offer their own unique things, and it feels super satisfying to go back to earlier parts of the castle and completely plow through enemies to, backtrack. And it doesn't feel too grindy or tedious. It just feels really great to see your character constantly get levels up in scaling and get new weapons, only to go back to earlier parts of the castle that gave you a lot of trouble to completely mop the floor with those enemies with the tap of one button. It's pretty satisfying and a power trip, but again, the later parts of the castle definitely will keep you in check. Speaking of keeping you in check, the boss battles. Boss battles are so much fun. I really loved all the unique creations we had going on here. You had vampires that were throwing blood at you, a giant hand that was picking up cinder blocks and throwing them at you and flicking you with their finger only to have you splat against the wall. You had to fight a clone of yourself at one point, which was pretty interesting to see. Typical, flame abysmal dragons and hydras. That was an interesting fight. There's a lot of really great bosses here, and the hidden bosses at the end of the game are some of the most punishing bosses I've ever had the pleasure of fighting. Very difficult, but so much fun. Overall, the core gameplay is super solid. I mean, it just works really well. The combat's very punchy, the amount of weapons you get is great, and the enemies are really tough and fun to encounter, minus a couple of really annoying ones like those tiny monkey guys and the Medusa head kind of things. But hey, you gotta have your classic SNES, NES style villains when you're playing a game of this caliber. Speaking of this caliber, the castle design is out of this world. The core presentation of it is just perfect. I really enjoy everything they have going on here, from the dingy but kind of lush dark gardens to the really beautiful gold-plated hallways. There's all sorts of variety here. My personal favorite part is the Tower of Dragons, which is basically you just walking all the way up this spiral tower to encounter all sorts of crazy twisty-turvy enemies, and the castle design really takes a turn for the absolute gorgeous here. It has beautiful concrete hallways, a wonderful interesting library, and a lot of great puzzles that really was the standout section of the game for me. However, there are certain parts that do tend to drag a little bit or feel not as interesting, mainly, unfortunately, the underwater section. As cool as it is to get a certain power up and super speed all around, it does feel a little generic, all things considered, compared to everything else the castle has to offer. This was kind of part of the endgame levels, so basically the desert, underwater, ice, and fire lands of the game, those were the ones that kind of started dragging for me, as you could feel that they weren't necessarily rushed or added in last minute. They really felt like they were just there to get you to that hidden boss fight, which is okay. The game's puzzles aren't too complex. A lot of them just require a lot of either trial or error, like moving a block to a certain spot or picking it up and dragging it back to a far off place with a little bit of backtracking, or it requires you to just get an entirely different item completely so you can finally traverse an area. It's your standard Metroidvania fare. I would have preferred something a little more Zelda-esque, maybe getting new demonic shards or something to really help you out. There's only one section in particular, which is again the underwater section, where this really kind of comes to play. But for the most part, everything is pretty subpar and standard in the puzzle region. I just really wish the demonic shards were used a bit more for things outside of combat is all. There again are a couple of transformation things you have to do, but it's nothing too punishing. Also, the game is absolutely gorgeous. It runs at a relatively smooth 60 FPS. The game looks stunning and I really enjoy the visuals. They have this kind of manga watercolor look with the way the black outlines are very thick on each character character, adding for this really unique cel-shaded look on top of these beautiful watercolor style paintings on at least the character models, which I thought was pretty cool. The amount of cosmetics and stuff you get to equip to your character is also really fun, and it offers a lot of replay value in that regard, trying to find each nook and cranny. The only downside with performance is that sometimes they'll just straight up freeze. I don't know exactly why. Usually when I'm getting a new shard or something of that nature, or exploring a new area and it's taking a minute to load in, it just flat out freezes and everything stops and it kind of comes back to working, back to fluid 60 and all of that. I don't know if this was an Xbox One exclusive issue, maybe you have better performance on the PC, PS4, or even Switch version, but there was a couple of nagging quirks right there that I didn't quite understand. At first it didn't happen too frequently, but towards the middle and end of the game it started happening a lot more, especially when you take out enemies in droves. I think it's something with the game being overloaded with the amount of shards you're getting, or RNG trying to spawn in which shard I should get from killing like 6 enemies at once or something of that nature. I don't know. It did just cause a couple of lagging and freezes, but nothing that was too egregious. Also, there was one boss fight in particular that completely wrecked the frame rate to the point where it was like in the 30 and 20s possibly. It was during a specific section and it was kind of frustrating because you needed to dodge, so that was a little bit of an issue, but overall it wasn't the worst. You know, it kind of recovered, and I really do excuse it because at least everything else is pretty fun. Maybe they'll release a patch to further help these issues and improve and smoothen everything out, so I'm not too worried about that. Oh, and of course I have to mention the music. The music in this game is so good. Words do not do it justice. You just gotta listen to some of these tracks. Take a listen. See, I'm telling you, Castlevania style music always works, and Bloodstained offers its own unique flavor to the mix that really hits home. Bloodstained is a really unique game. I love the amount of stuff it offers, from being able to craft different potions, armor, equipment, and all sorts of typical Metroidvania stuff, to being able to get a bunch of cool new weapons to toy around with and enjoy, on top of having pretty varied monster design, incredible boss fights, and a very wonderfully designed castle that I had a blast exploring up into its 90% completion. This game just hits all the right spots, and its wonderful callbacks to the other Castlevania Metroidvania games as old, such as the invert mechanic being added as a basically big call out to the entire castle flipping on itself in Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and many other callbacks to indie games and other pop culture references, is just something that I very much appreciated. I think this is a game that I don't want you guys to sleep on. It's at a very modest price for the amount of content you get, being $40, and there's a lot of extra modes you can unlock throughout the course of just playing the game, which I think is really cool and definitely needs to be commended for, especially in the year 2019. Games like these are dimes a dozen. We don't really get them like that, and this is an indie game that's definitely going to stick in my head for years and years to come. I love everything that it had. I really enjoyed the gameplay provided, and I really liked going back to that SNES style punishing difficulty where it's frustrating, but it's all on you, you know what I mean? I wasn't getting too bad at the game. I just know I had to take a step back, realize what I need to change up, and go for the gold. And that's what I very much enjoyed with Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. Wonderful music, beautiful presentation, pretty good gameplay despite some of the frame rate issues and all of that jazz. If you guys are interested in it and you think the review or gameplay I've shown looks good, then I implore you to pick this game up. You could use Xbox Game Pass for, I think it's $2 for 2 months or $1 for 1 month right now, and you could give the game a shot for basically free. And if that's something you want to do just to test the waters, I really recommend it. It's on PC Game Pass, Xbox One Game Pass, PS4, PC, and the Nintendo Switch. Hope you enjoyed my quick little review with Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. Hope you all have a wonderful day. See you guys next time. Peace.